Good evening, church family. In 1924, Eric Liddell was one of the many athletes who was training for the upcoming Paris Olympics. Eric was a pretty good rugby player, an amazing sprinter, and most importantly, he was a follower of Christ. He was one of the most favored runners to win his strongest event of the 100-meter dash. However, as the games approached, Eric learned that 100-meter races would be held on Sunday. And so with much faith and courage, he decided not to run the 100-meter dash, but to instead attend worship. Eric then settled upon running the 400-meter race, a race he was not nearly as favored in. So people began to criticize him. They thought he had thrown away his Olympic dream. But all of the low expectations and judgments from people across the country were all forgotten on the day of the race. Because Eric not only won a gold medal in the 400-meter dash, but he broke the previously held world record. When he was asked how he could have done it, Eric said, "The secret of my success over the 400 meters is that I run the first 200 meters as fast as I can. Then for the second 200 meters, with God's help, I run faster." You see, Eric understood something most never figure out. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it by his own strength. And until you realize that you can't do it on your own strength, you can't do it without God, you will never accomplish the things he intended you to, and you will never experience a life he created you to live. In Genesis chapter 25, if you would turn there now, we're introduced to two twin brothers, Jacob the younger and Esau the older. If you would read with me, starting in verse 27 of Genesis 25, again, that's Genesis chapter 27, verse 25, the Bible says, "When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, 'Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted.' Therefore his name was called Edom. Jacob said, 'Sell me your birthright now.' Esau said, 'I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?' Jacob said, 'Swear to me now.' So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright." So for those of you who don't know, back in this time period, birth order was a pretty big deal, especially when it came to being the firstborn son. The oldest son was so special purely because he received two things: the birthright and the father's blessing. The birthright was an inheritance of not only all the father's wealth and possessions, but of leadership and authority in the family lineage. The blessing, however, was a final proclamation that spoke succession, divine favor, and covenant promises over the son's life. We've already seen how Jacob wrongfully got Esau to give him his birthright. And if you keep on reading later in Genesis, you see how Jacob manipulated and lied to his father, stealing Esau's blessing, just to then flee from his home out of fear for his brother. Jacob, despite being physically weaker than Esau, often managed to control the situation, to manipulate others, and to get whatever he thought he wanted at anyone's expense. But when you look at it, Jacob was a liar. He was a coward, and he was a thief. But in his fleeing from his brother, Jacob comes across this man at night who, unbeknownst to him, was God himself. And the Bible says, all night long, Jacob wrestled with God. You see, Jacob fought, and he pushed, and he refused to let go. He refused to give up. He wrestled and wrestled and wrestled until something happened. God touched the hip of Jacob and put it out of its socket. And at that moment, Jacob realized he no longer had the strength to fight any longer. So he gave up. He surrendered. Jacob stopped wrestling God, something that he had honestly been doing his entire life. Jacob, from a young age, was always wrestling with God with what he was called to do because he wanted his plan. He wanted his will for his life. Jacob finally realized he couldn't do it on his own. He finally realized he didn't have the strength. He finally understood that he needed to stop always trying to control things and manipulate others. So instead of wrestling with God, Jacob turned to God, who then blessed him. And Jacob went on his way to be a great man and a hero of the faith. His life completely changed that day, and it was changed by God. You see, I think many of us today, myself included, have been wrestling with God, whether we know it or not, just like Jacob. Many of us have been trying to rely on our own strength. We've been trying to hold on to control of our lives. We try to overcome temptations by sheer willpower. We strive to be perfect, but we miss the mark every single time. Church, we need to give up. We need to give up on our way. We need to give up on our strength. We need to surrender to God. You know, at the end of his life, the 400-meter world record holder and amazing athlete, Eric Liddell, had 3 last words. He said, "It's complete surrender." The same solution he spoke of and demonstrated so many years ago. And that's it, family. Surrender. So if you've been wrestling with God this evening, if you've been holding on to control of your own life, if you've been trying to overcome sin by brute force in your own will, it's time to let go. Run to the feet of Jesus. Surrender it over to God. Stop trying to win a battle that's already been won. You see, God isn't waiting for you to be perfect. He's waiting for you to see that you never will be, and that's the whole point. If you're ready to surrender tonight, if you're done trying to do things on your own, and you want to give your life to Christ in baptism, the opportunity stands here tonight to be guided and directed and forgiven by God. Or if you've already made that decision, but you're struggling and you need the prayers of the church, if there's anything we can do for you, I ask you, please come forward. Don't hesitate as we stand and as we sing.